Well, let's review the entire Old Testament story now that we're done. We have used this picture so many times. Let's work with this. We recall that Abraham, Genesis 12, really seems to be the solution, God's solution to the problem that had come Genesis 1 through 11. And that is the world of humans had started to worship the gods that had been placed over the cosmos. These gods do not seem to like humans. They seem to work against them. And so God calls a man, Abraham, to resist the worship of these gods and to worship the Creator God, Yahweh. With this loyalty to this God comes a bond, a promise, a covenant. And the covenant includes the idea of blessing, specifically a very large family or tribe or nation. And that becomes then the majority of our story as we move forward. This family is expected to repeat this paradigm of loyalty to Yahweh and resisting the worship of other gods. The purpose of this, and also we should say that God gave this family two things that are quite prevalent in the story, and that is one, memorable events. Think of like the Exodus or David's exploits. Things that in a non-literate society you would talk about with your family and rejoice in and remember and learn from. The other thing they were given was a sacred text. And this is the Old Testament itself, whether it be Torah, the law, the prophets, the writings, and things like this. A very sacred set of texts. This is a textual religion that really begins here for the first time in human history. And this family was to revere this text, and especially the story within the text. Normally, Yahweh will be seen to be rather quiet when it comes to world events. My guess is if we were to drop in at various points of the biblical story, we would be living in a world where our neighbors worshipped other gods and prayed to them regularly, whereas we worshipped Yahweh and prayed to Him, but the actual daily life between us and our neighbors would be very much the same. Well, let's take the story then further. Why did God do this? What is His biggest purpose for all this? It's so that the neighbor, the Moabite, the Ammonite, would look at this and say, I want your God. I want to stop worshiping think of a Rahab. I want to stop worshiping my God, and I want to worship the true God. That would be a paradigm. Think of Rahab or Ruth, Naaman the Syrian. People like this who meet Yahweh through the people that worship Him throughout that story. Well, as our story continues, we had a lot of this, that is small failures and even large corporate failures of the people. Now, of course, individuals could remain right with Yahweh, but the people themselves struggle with this back and forth pattern of failure, disloyalty, loss, wartime loss, or finally then this grand exile that puts the people in Babylon and then Persia. By the time we come to the end of the story, and I think it's only fair to say, we have landed at the end of the story with basically a thud, and that is Nehemiah has brought the people back from Persia, but he admits in Nehemiah chapter 9, we are slaves. In other words, the story does not end happily, if we're going to be honest with the Old Testament, that Nehemiah has brought people back to Israel from Persia, but it's a small fraction of the original family, and he admits that they are slaves living now in a dilapidated city called Jerusalem, and we even had to remember at the end of Nehemiah, we even had to do a lotto system to have people be willing to move into the city of Jerusalem. Well, I think this is the best evidence that the Old Testament is not the end of the story. And so let's think ahead to what kind of thoughts or questions we'll go into the New Testament waiting for. Some things we will not be waiting for would be things like how to be personally right with God. That is a paradigm set up very early. We would not be waiting for proof that God is kind, loving, forgiving, and merciful to those who are loyal. That has been proven many times. We are not even really waiting for a means of salvation. Again, people are being right with God, or saved, if we want to use that term, through the graciousness of a God who promises to be with anyone who is loyal to Him. So I would even recommend that the means of salvation is already in our story, and no one is waiting for that. But we are waiting for several ideas, and I would call it, as I mentioned in my last video, what are the questions of the Old Testament story that we look forward to getting answered in the New Testament? I can think of several. One would be, how and when will Israel's slavery end? Secondly, how will this new Israel look? It's sometimes called the remnant when they come out. Will it feel like David's day with his kind of kingdom? Or what, again, would it feel like? Number 3, how will this new covenant, we've heard of a new covenant in Jeremiah 31, how will that loyalty work when we're told in Jeremiah 31 that someday this entire nation or this group will become loyal to Yahweh? How will that feel and look? After we've been so used to this pattern of failure, that would be a shock. 4, how will the Jew and Gentile tensions that we've felt all along the way ever be solved, if ever? 5, we've heard a word of a human ruler with Yahweh. This is in Daniel 7, verses 13 and 14. Even at the end of Malachi, we hear of a messenger who is going to introduce an Adonai, a master. So there's a hint, a strong hint of two powers in heaven, shall we call it, or I would even say a binitarianism, where we will be worshiping, these people here will be worshiping not just one being, but possibly two beings in the heavens. That's a mystery waiting to be solved, it seems. Number 6, what will happen to divine beings, especially the bad ones? We have really not heard how the story of divine beings either got its beginning, a lot of its middle, we don't understand it, and especially of its end. I would be very curious if the New Testament would answer that question. Number 7, are wicked humans judged? Does a person who is worshiping a created deity, do they just die like an animal, or is there some kind of judgment to follow? Number 8, there has been word of resurrection, Daniel chapter 12. How will that work in the future life? And then that would bring up number 9. How will this current world end? What will these people go through to come to the end of our normal human existence, if ever? And then number 10, what does practical, on-the-ground loyalty look like? I think it's a question going all the way back to the days of Abraham. Behavior is not a requirement of loyalty, but it's expected of loyalty. How does that work? And what will that expectation of behavior even look like on the ground as we are loyal on this side? So, for these answers and a fitting end to our story, let's be ready to read the New Testament and understand its story and how it adds and even completes what we've learned so far.